My mom and Cal were arguing in the car. He usually took the lead at reprogramming us back into normal humans after visits with our dad and didn't understand why Mom was letting us go over there for Thanksgiving. Nothing ever good came of our visits. Why would this be any different? My mom, the eternal optimist, believed that Dad deserved the benefit of the doubt. He's their dad, she'd say. My parents met in high school and became parents in high school. As her dreams of being a homemaker were coming true, his dreams of being a rock star were being crushed. This conflict of interest would produce 5 children, myself and my 4 brothers, and a divorce by the time my parents were only 28 years old. My dad was living with a man named John, who had recently won the lottery and bought a big house for all of his buddies to live in. The house was at the top of a hill, surrounded by pine trees. It looked like something out of a magazine on the outside, but looked a bit like a frat house on the inside. Cal stayed in the car at the bottom of the driveway when my mom walked us up the hill and into the house. There was a mysterious woman in fishnet stockings bent over the oven, playfully working the turkey baster when we walked through the door. My mother had learned to roll her eyes at that kind of stuff, something that I would eventually pick up myself. But for now, this woman was going to be serving me Thanksgiving dinner. I didn't know who she was or whom she was with, and I would never see her again after that day. My dad always had a lot of friends around, and Thanksgiving was certainly no exception. He was the lead singer of a band called Toys. Toys with a Z. That's what gave it some edge. Their tagline was, "The band you can play with." That's what took the edge away again. My dad's friends and bandmates would probably scare most young children, but they were like family to me. Their long hair, tattoos, and questionable hygiene didn't faze me. I lovingly referred to my dad's lead guitarist as Uncle Boggy and found it endearing the way he would always flip his hair around as he walked and talked, stood up, sat down. There was always a hair flip happening. Uncle Boggy was there this particular Thanksgiving, along with my dad, John, fishnet stockings lady, and a few other people that I can't remember. We were surrounded by food, air guitar, and permed hair. We dug it. But as soon as we got through dinner, we were quickly ushered outside to entertain ourselves. As dusk set in, we knew that this was the point when none of the grown-ups would pay any more attention to us, and we could literally get away with whatever we wanted. My older brother, Jeremy, and I hatched a plan to make a fire and cook some s'mores. We lived in the Sierra foothills and spent most of our summer weekends camping, so we knew how to build a campfire. We gathered twigs and fished some newspaper out of the trash to use as kindling. We struck up a match and got busy blowing, stoking, blowing some more, but the fire wasn't picking up beyond a few flickering flames. The air was a bit damp and cool, so we figured we might need some backup. We went down to the garage to see if there was anything in there that would help. Jeremy hollered at me from the back of the garage, holding up a red can. "How about some gas?" Perfect! We hurried back up the hill to our fire, which was now almost completely gone. This fire needed a lot of help. We stood above the pit and decided to pour just a little bit of gas. Whoosh! This is how we learned that even a small amount of gas can set the world on fire. The flames shot up higher than the roof. What just happened? There was a ringing in my ear and time seemed to slow down. The first thing I noticed was that the hose was on fire. Uh-oh, John was going to be pissed. The second thing I noticed is that I was on fire. My left leg was covered in flames. Took me a second to comprehend it. The next thing I thought of was what I learned in school. Stop, drop, and roll. But I was on a gravel driveway, and even the smell of my own burning flesh couldn't get me to throw myself onto the gravel. I was frozen, in shock. The next thing I remember was waking up on the couch. Fishnet Stockings was trying to feed me children's Tylenol, the pink kind. I hated that stuff. Still not quite comprehending what had just happened, things were fuzzy. Stockings kept insisting that I take the Tylenol. It was the only thing she could think of. And when I would refuse, she'd look back at the rest of the grown-ups, shrugging her shoulders. They didn't know what to do either. Half of them still had guitars and cigarettes in their hands. A child catching on fire was a major buzzkill. Then, just as sudden as the fire exploded, the shock wore off, and I could feel my leg cooking. It didn't just feel like it was cooking, it was actually cooking. I took the Tylenol. That seemed to make the grown-ups happy, and they went back to doing whatever it was they were doing. Even at the age of 10, I knew that something was off and that my dad was suppressing his concern. Days later, when John's house was raided by police and everyone was arrested, then I would learn more about why nobody bothered to take him to the hospital or even call my mom and tell her what happened. For now, I was stuck on the couch, and it would be 24 hours before I would see a doctor. Without any care, my leg continued to cook itself into second and third degree burns. By the time my dad was getting ready to take us back to our mom that following evening, I couldn't walk. Our town was having a big Christmas parade that night. It was something we looked forward to every year. This time, I obviously didn't care about the parade or waving to my friends on the floats. I was in pain and scared. But we had to go because Cal's parents owned a Western clothing store right on the main street where the parade was taking place, and that was the meeting spot to return us to our mom. My dad had to carry me through the crowd of parade goers and into the store, past a sea of cowboy hats, and handed me over to my mom, stating to her casually that I had burned myself. While her attention was on me, he split before she even got to ask a single question. Typical Jim, my mom thought, not really realizing yet the severity of what had happened. A crowd of concerned cowboys gathered around as my mom sat me on the cash register counter and asked to look at the burn. I was rocking some elastic ankle sweatpants at the time, and when I pulled up the pant leg, it caught on what was now a giant blister covering my leg. You could hear the collective gasps as a mass of cloudy greenish-yellow pus gushed out of my leg and all over the counter. Somehow, I was the most calm person in the room, as my mom simultaneously began screaming and crying. She knew two things: that this was a very serious injury that was going to haunt me for a very long time, and that my dad was to blame. She scooped me up and rushed me straight to the hospital. There, I endured what can only be described as medieval torture. The doctor peeled the remaining skin off my leg and used a steel brush to scrub away all the charred skin and flesh. This was a ritual I would have to do every day for the next 10 days. My mom would drive into the hospital, the gauze was removed, the leg was scrubbed, then it was rewrapped. They had to do this to prevent infection and keep the wound fresh while letting it slowly heal. Once that phase was over, I went down to weekly appointments to have the wound examined. Eventually, the physical wounds on my leg were healed, and this story would become the one that sparked many years of collecting scars at the hand of my father's drug addiction, the emotional ones requiring a little bit more time to heal. But time does heal everything. My dad has been clean now for 18 years. He has a big boy job and everything. He still plays music, but no longer thinks it's going to make him a rock star, and leaves the recreational drugs out of the picture. Unlike my mom or my brothers, he and I can talk about what happened without falling apart. We joke about it even. It turns out that in hindsight, catching on fire is hilarious. Just ask my dad and me. You still can't bring this up around my mom or my brother because they don't have a sense of humor about it. But they can't see what I see. A kid who was stuck in a grown-up's body, a conflicted man who had a good heart, but bad instincts, someone who will never grow up. And I wouldn't ask him to because now I'm a grown-up and I can make sure nothing bad happens to me or him.